our families with affordable energy. And that's the basis of our plan. And so I'm grateful for the partnership as we think about the next 25 years, build for the future, and secure the energy, reliable, affordable energy, and clean energy that our families deserve. Thank you so much for your participation today.
Thank you. My position on working with the government is we have to. We're not going to solve the problem by being anti-government, etc. I have strong views about nuclear power and having lived through the previous duration. So I just want to say that OSEA is not an adversarial group. We have intervener status at the OEB. We can bring forward our trade association positions. With that, I'm just going to quickly introduce 3 guest speakers, keynote speakers who I've known for many years, except Giselle, who I just met. So Bob Willard, who's going to speak on the procurement side, and I've known Bob from many sustainable speaking engagements because I use his slides in my own presentation. Giselle, who I met at a recent, I think it was Junior Environmental Professionals downtown, where she spoke about the Hydro One efforts and really the future of a smart grid and the things that she's doing. And then Ian London, who worked with me back at Ontario Hydro, who's now the executive director of the critical minerals. And he tells me all about the challenges that we have, and he's going to share that with you. So I'm going to let them each take their time, do their thing, press the button, and start with Bob, and then pass it on to the next to save time. And I think I'll let you advance to the next. And thank you. So your slides are in the deck. Next.
Good morning. So let me connect the dots between this topic of net zero procurement or procurement in general and this desire for us to use more renewables, especially clean energy. Let me start off with the state of the world at this stage. The climate crisis is getting worse. As evidenced by the COP that just finished last week, the efforts by governments to address it are pretty dismal. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses are sitting on the sidelines waiting for government to fix it, and that's not going to happen. Businesses procure things, and I think there's an opportunity here for them to be more demanding of their suppliers, the companies that provide them with their goods and services, to help reduce their greenhouse gases so we can address climate change. So right now, very few companies in their procurement are asking suppliers where they are on reducing their greenhouse gases. So net zero procurement encourages companies to do more of that with their suppliers. So what I think we need to do is unleash the buying power of governments especially, but also companies and other organizations as a market force to mobilize businesses in the race to net zero, because many of them are just, at this point, totally disconnected. So when we talk about net zero procurement, this is the definition, a 4-part definition, to make sure that you're getting best value, of course, for whatever it is that you're acquiring. The attributes of the goods and services, low carbon and circularity, designed for circularity, from suppliers who are most committed to circularity and science-based net zero greenhouse gas reduction targets. So most procurement people are fixated 90% of the time on the first part, low carbon goods and services, the attributes of whatever it is that they're getting. They don't pay much attention to the attributes of the company producing them. And what we're encouraging them to do is to do a lot more of that. Because if you work on that supplier's attributes and whether they're engaged in this, you can make their efforts to reduce the greenhouse gases matter. Because when you're appraising the bids, you score suppliers on how they're doing on reducing their greenhouse gases and their commitment to it. And you give that score enough weight to get their attention. And if you significantly weight anything in an RFP, it really gets the attention of the company that's responding to it. Used to work for IBM. I used to be on the supplier side of a lot of the RFPs. And the first thing we looked at when we got an RFP was request for proposal was how many points are associated with each of the specs. You attach a lot of points to the specs that have to do with the supplier's commitment to reduce their greenhouse gases, and they are going to start to crank up their focus on that. So that's the dynamic that we're trying to take advantage of here. Why would customers care about that? Because customers are required not only to report on how they're doing on their own greenhouse gas reduction, scope 1 and 2, but also the other 15 categories of scope 3 emissions. And as it turns out, over 11 times their own emissions are being emitted in their other parts of their value chain. A lot of that is the 1 and 2 that you see on that slide. It's the carbon footprint of the products that they are acquiring. So it's the embodied carbon in those things that they are accountable for in the year in which they acquire those goods. And they are trying to get that down to net zero by 2050 and halfway there by 2030. So it's that scope 3 categories 1 and 2 that's the focus of all of this. So what we need to do is to get the carbon footprint of the products, which is really composed of all of the greenhouse gases that are emitted throughout that supply chain that you see up there, the 4 tiers of suppliers. That 1 and 2, those 1 and 2 things that you see are their scope 1 and 2 emissions that are contributing to the embodied carbon in whatever it is being acquired by the customer. And the only way to get that carbon footprint down to zero is for the suppliers to get their scope 1 and 2 down to zero. You with me on this? And how do they do that? They use renewables. So that's the dynamic that we're trying to tap into. So what we're talking about here is using net zero procurement as a way to engage suppliers who right now are not engaged in this. And we need to use the buying power of organizations, especially governments that are really committed to this stuff, to engage them. And if we do that, they're going to start using more renewables. If they use more renewables, we'll be able to address the climate crisis, and we've got a fighting chance of everything working. Right now, the federal government of Canada, when they're procuring things, are starting to ask their suppliers to reduce their greenhouse gases in line with science-based targets. So about a year ago, the federal government passed a regulation, a standard as they call it, requiring their major suppliers with over $25 million worth of business a year with the feds, to commit to reducing their greenhouse gases to net zero by 2050 and halfway there by 2030. That's fine for the big guys, but a lot of companies are not large companies. So in Canada, if I had a scroll of all the companies in Canada here, what percent of that scroll do you think have fewer than 500 employees? Small or medium-sized enterprises is the definition of companies that have fewer than 500 employees. Roughly, what percent? 90%? That's a little low.
96.
Still low. 99.8. 99.8 of the companies in Canada are SMEs. You drop it down to 100 employees or less, it's 98.1. 98.1 in Canada, in the States, in Europe, on the planet. Most of the companies are small and medium-sized enterprises. A couple of years ago, the Business Development Bank, BDC, did a study of SMEs and where they were on this. And why would they bother with SMEs? They don't, each of them emit very much in terms of greenhouse gases, but collectively, a lot. In fact, 42% of the emissions from Canada as a country are coming from SMEs. So BDC asked SMEs, how's it going on reducing your greenhouse gases? Are you working on it? And about 50% said, yeah, but they're not committed to the science-based targets. So 50%ers say, yeah, we're into it. Another 18% said, yeah, we're thinking about it. And about 33%, about a third of them, said, no, we've got no plans and we're not thinking about it. If they don't get with the program, we're cooked. So we need to engage them, and they are in the supply chains of a lot of these organizations. So here's the plot. I'm going to use a magic coloring book to illustrate the dynamic that we're working on here. So right now, we don't have very much going on. It's a little bleak. We don't have businesses engaged the way we'd like to. So it's not going very far. But if we get the federal government to implement net zero procurement, we're going to engage one heck of a lot of companies. The federal government has about 400,000 suppliers. And if we got all of them engaged in this, I think we've got a fighting chance of getting to where we are. And if the federal government ripples that down to the provinces and to the municipalities as an approach that they help them do as well, we'll unleash over $200 billion worth of buying power. And I think we've got a fighting chance of doing a little bit better and start to pick up some momentum on this and start to make this come alive a little bit better. But Canada is only responsible for less than 2% of the greenhouse gases on the planet. Most of it's coming from somewhere else. So we need to engage other jurisdictions. And COP, as you know, is one place where companies or organizations, governments that at least pretend that they care about this, get together every once in a while. So if we can get all of the companies, 195 of the countries, 195 countries that go to COP, to sign on to use net zero procurement in their jurisdictions, we've got a fighting chance of being able to get to where we want to. That would unleash $9 trillion of buying power on this. And we've got a fighting chance of making it happen. And then it gets really exciting. So we start off with a little bit bleak, but it gets really, really good. So it may seem a little bleak now, but we're going to do this. Thank you.
So much. Thank you. I'm just going to get the agenda. Welcome, Giselle. I'm just going to take this down. So welcome. And you can take care of that. I just wanted to find out who's on next. You're up.
All righty.
Actually, just on time. No problem.
Good morning, everyone. Is the camera adjusting to see me over here? I think so.
We see you
And you can hear me. Great. Okay, so thank you so much to OSEA for inviting me to speak this morning. My name is Giselle DeGrandis, and I'm a senior manager at Hydro One, where I run a large and growing demand response program that I'll be describing in a couple minutes. But I want to just talk about today electrification and decentralization. So this slide, I need to do a lot of things with this slide, but maybe I'll start by saying that the grid operator is forecasting tremendous growth, 75% by 2050. And good news stories behind this: generally, economic growth, population growth, as well as electrification. And what do I mean by electrification? So we're already seeing it. Maybe many of you are already doing this in your own lives. In response to climate change and increasingly favorable economics, many people are starting to replace their equipment that runs on fossil fuels and relies on combustion with clean electricity equipment. So they are switching to things like heat pumps to heat their homes and water, electric vehicles to get around, and industrial processes like electric arc furnaces. And this is great news for climate action, because electrification can get us a lot of the distance to decarbonizing the economy and help keep global warming to safe levels. There are other advantages to electrifying equipment, including it tends to be much more efficient. And then I guess anyone who's been around or driven an EV or even an electric leaf blower knows that they are quieter. They are not producing toxic exhaust, and it increases energy security. And the main thing that I want to talk about today is the smart functionalities in many of this equipment as well. But overall, this is a really exciting time for me to have joined the utility sector 3 years ago, moving over from the policy world. Customers embarking on their energy transition journeys through electrification is super important because of those climate impacts, but also in order to keep the grid reliable and affordable to support all of that demand growth that's coming. It does create new challenges and opportunities for utilities like mine to figure out how to leverage this equipment to support the grid in the most cost-effective way possible while meeting this demand growth quickly. Maybe before I move slides, I'll say that a lot of this electric equipment counts as distributed energy resources. I'll quickly define that term as equipment that generates power, like solar panels, or stores power, like batteries, or is a controllable load, like heating or cooling controlled by a smart thermostat, for example, or an EV charger. So those create an opportunity for utilities. Those create an opportunity for utilities to engage with customers in new ways. And from the bottom up, our grid, many of you will know the folks that I've chatted with this morning who worked for Ontario Hydro back in the day. Our grid in Ontario, North America, was built around centralized power plants connected to transmission, stepped down to lower voltage at the distribution level, and then pushed out to homes and businesses. But distributed energy resources that our customers are adopting are changing the game and creating new opportunities that I'm going to touch on. Briefly, Hydro One, for those unfamiliar, we were spun out of the old Ontario Hydro 25 years ago, and we are now the largest transmission and distribution provider in the province. We own and operate about 95% of the transmission system, but more remarkably, in my view, 125,000 kilometers of distribution lines running in that pink distribution service territory there. That's enough wire to wrap the world 3 times. That is a lot of wire. This is an enormous service territory for 1.5 million residential and business customers, mostly rural, some suburban. Right now, Ontario is summer peaking, but some of our regions right now for Hydro One already have winter peaks. And the grid operator is forecasting we will become a dual peaking system with summer and winter peaks in about 15 years' time as more people adopt heat pumps. So how is Hydro One preparing for electrification? We've got sophisticated forecasting tools that we are starting to use and a regional planning approach to meet emerging energy needs. First of all, we're building new transmission lines with Indigenous equity partnerships. And actually, thank you to David for mentioning the Globe and Mail Indigenous Clean Energy event today. Hydro One is going to be participating in that as well to talk about these equity partnerships for all of our major transmission lines that we're going to be building. We are building a fast charger EV network across the province. And I think these last 2 bullets are the ones that I'm most excited about. Intelligent operations. By modernizing the grid with intelligent operations, we are increasing cost effectiveness, reliability, and resilience. This is important for alleviating upward pressure on rates for customers and getting the most from existing equipment. We are also engaging customers in new ways. We're starting to proactively ask customers about their electrification plans. Hydro One has an annual survey equipment where we ask, what are people using? What are they planning to buy? When are they planning to buy it? And we have a good sense of who's got what and what types of programming might be useful to support the customers as well as the grid. We're also connecting their distributed energy resources, their solar panels, their batteries, their level 2 chargers, and inviting them to participate in the operation of a safe, affordable, reliable grid. So here's the program that my team runs at Hydro One. This is a residential demand response program that we launched in spring of 2023. And customers enroll their smart devices and allow us to curtail their equipment use in exchange for rewards. We've got over 26,000 households now enrolled with over 29,000 devices. You can see that most of those devices are HVAC smart thermostats. We've got 27,000 of those, and those control largely central AC systems. But we are starting to enroll customers that also have electric furnaces to start to build up that winter demand response capacity for the program. Also on that note, we are enrolling and already have about 1,000 baseboard smart thermostats controlling this quite expensive and inefficient heating source. We also have a low-income project that's in market right now, setting up some of our customers with free baseboard smart thermostats to help them better manage their bills, but also enable them to participate in the demand response program. We've got about 800 EVs enrolled in the program and about actually 150 level 2 chargers. This has been a really important learning exercise, allowing us to see customer charging behavior, to understand, is there a need for managed charging programming? What's the value of event-based demand response for EVs? And giving the engineers in our planning and operations teams better understanding of what to get ready for, sort of in line with some of the forecasting work that Hydro One's been doing. And starting this week, we are enrolling home batteries into the program. And I mentioned 40 here specifically because that's the size of the pilot for this device type. So maybe I'll mention that Hydro One owns about 600 Tesla Powerwalls right now that we've installed with 300 customers who were experiencing extremely poor reliability. And we got approval from the Ontario Energy Board to purchase and place behind the meter with our customers Tesla Powerwalls, rather than doing more expensive feeder upgrades for these customers. So that's a non-wire solution, and that's the type of thing that Hydro One is doing a lot more of. And the demand response program I run is also intended to be a non-wire solution. We are looking to quantify the deferral value of capital upgrades enabled by leveraging flexible demand with our customers. And yeah, it's been incredible to grow the program this large, this quickly. And it's been a learning program throughout. And we're looking forward to learning what's gonna happen with the home batteries, and starting with that pilot size, but with the opportunity to scale across the 600 batteries that we do own. If I have a couple more minutes, maybe I'll mention reasons why people sign up for this program. They've been piling in. Since we opened this program and let our customers know about it, customers, they're motivated for the initial incentive. There's $75 if you enroll your smart thermostat, controlling a central AC system, for example. But just as many people tell us that they signed up for looking to have environmental impact or to support grid reliability. So there is this opportunity to increasingly engage customers in new ways to support the operation of a affordable, reliable, clean grid that's not just building new nuclear and connecting it to the transmission system. And these distributed energy resources create an opportunity for community resilience as well, that I think is an angle that Hydro One and the utility sector is going to be exploring more in the future. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Clicker up here?
Green forward.
Which one, green forward?
Yeah, the big one goes forward.
That's not mine.
Oh, that was contact.
That's mine.
Okay, there you go. Thanks.
Good morning, and thank you for the kind invitation, because I'm going to bring a slightly different perspective to the conversation today. Fully welcome and appreciate the good work that OSEA has been doing in sustainability and all that. But I think we all have to recognize it's hardware that makes much of this work, and to make hardware work, and software for that matter, because they run on computers and communication devices, it all comes down to materials. And I'll give you a sense today of what all this chatter is about critical materials, because it impacts, can we actually supply and can we actually industrialize it here in Canada? Or are we reliant on somebody else? And in some respect, they don't comply with some of the grand objectives of this country. Sorry? Pull the mic in, that better?
Yeah, no, because we're transmitting across the province.
Across the... Hello, Sudbury. Actually, it started off as a nickel mine at one point in time, and it became a whole city. There's a list of 34 of the critical materials as defined by Canada. Essentially, what you're looking at is a periodic table.
Because the end of the day, and I'll show some examples of where materials come in. And it ranges from copper, because we say we're going to electrify this province. Well, where's the copper coming from? Where's the devices coming from? We're going to have batteries. Where's lithium graphite? And I'll show you some of those examples and where they're used. We talk about, well, you name a gallium. People will say, what's gallium? Well, what do you think semiconductors are made of? Well, what do I need a semiconductor for? They all integrate into providing the kinds of equipment and systems that we all desire. The criticality determined is, do we even have the materials, or what industries are desperate to get their hands on? Well, and I'll highlight, Canada has many of these materials. They're all in the ground. In the ground doesn't build anything. And then once we get it out of the ground, we actually rely on others to do it. What are some of the major applications? Some of them you heard today: energy storage devices, lightweight materials. Why are we driving these cars which weigh so much when I can use aluminum, scandium alloys to lightweight the car? And then get additional, I was going to say mileage, kilometerage, or whatever the term is nowadays, of that battery. Magnets, motors, and robotics. And I'll show you a couple of examples of magnets, which they're more than just holding on your lapel. Communication, digitalization, and AI platforms. Everybody says AI, it's all software. Where do you think it runs? And that's going to be one of the biggest energy demands and material demands going forward. It can go on to power generation. How do we make it more efficient, distribute it, et cetera? Distribution, and of course, its utilization. And lastly, where we don't, and a competing resource, is a medical diagnosis and treatments. Those are all the competing demands for materials. And what's Canada going to do about it? Or Canada and our partners. But as you find in this great world, all you have to do is read the papers the last little while. Our friends are not necessarily our best friends. You add tariffs and there goes our low-cost options, unless we can rely on ourselves a little more. This is a rather complicated, this came out of the European mapping, and you'll notice on some of them, you'll see wind turbines. You're going to see solar panels. You're going to see communication devices. Eventually, we look at power generation, we look at e-mobility, and on the your left-hand side, some of the materials that go into it. But I'll use a simpler example just to illustrate. And this is, again, a little older. A simple car. I used to ask my grandchildren, how many motors are there in a car? I used to say one. That was under the hood. There's hundreds of motors in your car. What do you mean motors? Does your seat go up and down, back and forth, sideways? When's the last time you cranked the window? Now, we don't need those. It's not energy efficient. Well, those take materials. Those are miniaturized motors. To make those motors, you need rare earths. If you don't have the rare earths, you don't make the motor. What happens, we gave up on that, and then our global competitors have taken over. We used to import materials and manufacture them. Well, they said you can't have the materials any longer, buy the finished product. There's critical materials in the windshield of your car. Cerium. Why? Well, it cuts out UV. Why? Why do you think you don't want UV lights coming into your car? Any guess? Inside of your car is plastic, right? And UV deteriorates plastics. So you need the critical materials to build into the windshield so it doesn't get in there. And then how do you polish it smoothly? Again, critical materials. Lithium-ion batteries or nickel metal hydride battery, but lithium-ion batteries, not just lithium. You need cobalt, you need graphite, and you need the ability to bring it all together. And then you now need new chemicals to put out some of those fires until such time as that technology advances. But this just gives you a little bit of, even on the old catalytic, the ICE cars, the converters, the catalytic, the purifiers, those have critical materials in there. Your entire vehicles and many of the plans that I hear today, distributed generation, the thermostat, they're all technologies, all relying on materials. Where am I? Oh, there it is. When I talk about materials, and one of the false assumptions is critical materials is all about mining. So when you read the Globe and Mail, you read even in terms of some of our developments, oh, it's mining, and mining is bad because it's not green. Well, how do you think you get green? Sometimes you need, with all due respect, a little bit of the carbon, a little bit of how are we going to extract these materials and process them. So it's very much more of about advanced manufacturing, where we have to look at the whole net zero or carbon footprint. If we don't, and knowing that we are going to consume carbon for some of these operations or build on the carbon demand. Canada has some tremendous advantages. We have natural resources. We take great pride in them. As a matter of fact, for decades, all we did was we cut down trees and sent them to somebody else to process. We took ores and we sent them somewhere else to process. Well, we have the resources. We need to figure out how to get them out in a sustainable manner, or as best can be done, but time is not necessarily on our side. We have the human resource, although not a lot of next generation want to get into mining, manufacturing, etc., because we've kind of lost some of that in this country. But we can, and we have tremendous trade relationships, except for north-south of the border, and a premier who, with all due respect to the minister, who wants to exclude Mexico from the free trade agreements. Yeah, I'm too old to be shy. And we also have strong sustainability. Those are our advantages. What we're missing is the midstream processing, which brings in other challenges from an electricity side on how do you manage refineries, et cetera, and material processing facilities so that we can manufacture, produce our own product, and eliminate a lot of this transportation device, that we use. We take great pride. At one point in time, we did a traceability study. Actually, it became an ISO standard for rare earths. And one of the things was on fish, how this country produces fish, freezes it, ships it off to Europe so they can process it, and we buy it back packaged. Now, you tell me that makes sense, because I can tell you it makes no sense. So we have to build that midstream, and we should recognize that full supply chain. That one of the challenges we have is we have to do this and nobody is paying green premiums. You speak to the auto industry, I want these kind of products, I want them to these standards. I don't want an increase in hydro rates. Well, if they're having to pay more material, more costs for new transformers, new technologies, et cetera, you actually don't want to pay for it. So how are we going to drive both sustainability and the cost pressures on all of us? So I think I stirred the pot a little bit, or my objective this morning was to give you a sense of the broader an industrialization perspective on sustainability. Lots of work has been gone on sustainability and on the supply chain. Here's a classic report which we were done by the Industry Strategy Council. It was a great report. It now sits on the shelf somewhere in Washington, in Ottawa, because it was about industrialization and how to get folks off of those in mining, think about mining, those in the power sector, think about power, those involved in retail, think about retail. I think, Bob, you mentioned it. It's that whole package. You want circularity? I want to build battery plants. I want to be able to process or reutilize some of those batteries. And why would we mine it? We do a lot of talk in this country. We have great aspirations. Time to do something. And I think that now what I have to figure out is how do you change a coloring book? That I liked. I wonder if there's rare earths or lithium or carbon in that magic. Who knows? But I want to thank you for your time this morning, and I'll be around to take any questions you might have. Thank you, David.
Okay, so we're now going to have the panel. I'll introduce our board member, Anthony Warner, who will be moderating the first panel. Amel, Philip, Daniel, and Venoth, and Benram, sorry. No, it's the coffee break is at 10:35. I'm following the agenda. So welcome panel one. Grab a seat, a microphone, and I'm told to click forward. And thank you, Ian. And there we go. Thank you. I'll let you take over with the thing.